Welcome to episode 22 of the Disc and Dice podcast. My name, as always, is Paul. I am joined by my regular partner in crime, Timmy.
Hello. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty well. Keen to talk about some games. I think we've got an interesting selection of things on the plate today. Some new things, some old things. It should be good. And we're also, of course, 1 week out or thereabouts now from PAX, which I think we are both really looking forward to. I wanted to ask you quickly before we dive into other discussion, is there anything in particular that caught your eye from the schedule and the announcements of what's going to be at PAX?
You know, unlike past years, I haven't spent a lot of time poring over the schedule this year. There's been a few things like the exclusives that obviously you hear about, like you're going to be able to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I saw just today that it's going to be the first hands-on opportunity to play the Avengers game that is being made. But lining up for hours. Yeah, lining up for hours to play games, even that I'm interested in, is not something that I'm really about at PAX.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like time is too valuable a commodity to waste lining up for hours to play like a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like controlled setting of a game, you know? But I guess while I haven't gone poring over it, the thing that did surprise me is that unlike past years, I'm kind of interested in the keynote speaker for once.
Yeah, me too, actually. That caught my eye. The keynote speaker is David, I don't know how you say his last name, David Gaydar or Gaidar or something like that.
Mm.
And yeah, he's one of the writers on a bunch of RPGs and different games. I think we actually saw him a couple of years ago at PAX, didn't we, on a panel?
Yeah, so just for anybody that wants more context, he kind of got his start writing bits of the Baldur's Gate series because he was friends with someone involved in the development of that game. And then by the time BioWare kind of rolled around to doing your Dragon Age stuff, he was pretty much the story guy for that.
That's right.
And we saw him in a panel about it was about decision making in games, and it kind of strayed more closely to being about ethics and morals of choices in games. And it was a panel filled with mostly people that I wasn't familiar with, and were kind of like, you know, somebody who was doing a PhD on the morality of video games, and somebody, you know, who was for a gaming advocates group. And then David had the best credentials in the group. And he was a very quiet panelist. He kind of sat back and didn't say a lot and kind of let these guys plead their cases. But anytime he opened his mouth, it was 100 times more insightful than anything anybody else had to say. And even just like, there were kind of little factoids about the design of, like, say, Dragon Age Origins or Inquisition that, like, you hadn't noticed. Like, somebody was talking about how much better the choice mechanics and the morality meters and stuff in the Dragon Age sequels were, and he just quietly goes, "Did you notice that we didn't actually change anything in the back end? We just changed how it appeared." And
yeah, I think
he just completely undercut their argument, but made a really interesting point about how one perceives morality in a video game.
right, but it wasn't like, it wasn't kind of, it wasn't sort of like gotcha,
No.
like I undermine your argument. It was just like a really interesting addition to that. I think the thing he said was that they color coded morality in the early Dragon Age games, and then for the later ones, all they did was remove the color coding, but the system worked the same. So it wasn't like the Mass Effect kind of blue is Paragon, red is Renegade. They just made it all the same color, but it worked the same. And he was like, yeah, everyone responded as if it was this, fantastic overhaul of the morality system. He's like, yeah, we just took the colors away. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to him as the keynote speaker. Actually, like you kind of said, the keynote speaker has been something I haven't really enjoyed in general at PAX. I've been to a couple of them, and I guess it's just not for everyone. I think it really does depend on the person. Like, if you've got a real connection with their games and the kind of things they want to talk about, then it's probably pretty good. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, so like, I've never played the Baldur's Gate games. I didn't have a PC early in my gaming career to, like, kind of catch those ones when they were relevant. and I only ever tried Dragon Age, I think Inquisition, and I didn't get very far through it. It didn't feel like it was for me. I might have been playing too many other fantasy games at the time, and who knows. But having seen him and listened to him in previous years, he's somebody that I wish I had heard from at the panel I was at. So I'm keen to see him have his own platform and kind of do that.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, something we were talking about last week, or last episode rather, we were talking about Gwent and card games, digital card games in general. And between episodes, I noticed in the App Store on my phone that Gwent is coming to mobile. It's releasing sometime this month. And I was really interested in that because straight away I thought, I think I'm going to really enjoy that a lot more on mobile, and not really for any of the reasons that I said I was enjoying it on my PlayStation previously, but rather I think when I'm using my PlayStation, I feel like I want to be taking advantage of that system and like dynamic gameplay and graphics and narrative and all that sort of stuff. Whereas card game style play is the kind of game I like on my phone that I can pick up and put down. And so I think I'll enjoy it more because I'll get used to it more because I'll play it more. And I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, Paul.
That's I hadn't heard about this actually until you mentioned it just now. So this is the
Yeah.
first I'd heard of it. I actually had thought just the other day, because I've been playing some Magic Arena, and I was thinking that I would love this to be on like Android or something, so I could play it on my tablet. Like maybe
Right.
like sit in bed and play a round of Magic, that kind of thing. The point you made about when you play a console, you kind of want to use the console. I feel the same way, and it's one of the reasons why I kind of have bounced off digital card games a lot because for me, it's like one of the kind of draws of playing a card game is the physical cards, the kind of tangible experience of putting them on the table, and also kind of the social aspect of sitting across from a
Mm-hmm.
friend playing it. And so I've always kind of avoided digital card games because it almost feels like you're saying like it's a waste of that hardware. And also the other setting that I can play them in is vastly superior in my opinion. So I'd just rather
Mm-hmm.
save that experience for in person. But yeah, I kind of get what you say about it's a bit different if it's on mobile or tablet or that kind of thing. Um, I don't know if it'll get me to try Gwent, to be honest. Like
Yep.
I'm not heaps drawn towards that, but yeah, I'd be interested if they put Magic on those kind of devices.
Yeah, like you talking about using Magic on your tablet, if possible, like reminded me that when I really got into Hearthstone, it was on my tablet.
Mm-hmm.
I played heaps of it on my tablet. I don't have a PC again, so like I wasn't really playing it on that. But that I wouldn't have played it on a console either. Much in the same way that like it's only when I'm really stuck for things to do that I kind of turn to Gwent on my PlayStation. So I'm hoping that it has a good interface for mobile. Perhaps if you can play your friends specifically, I'll be able to convince you or JT to give it a go with me. But yeah, it just when it popped up, I went, "Oh, that's a no-brainer putting this onto a mobile platform." I'm surprised it hasn't come sooner.
Yeah, if it doesn't have like a challenge friend directly kind of thing, like does normal Gwent have that? Because Magic Arena does have that, and I feel like that's kind of why I've been trying to nag you guys and a couple of other friends
Mm.
to get in on that is because it does just have this like direct sort of put in your friend's username, play with them, that kind of thing, which I really like. Like I actually have been playing Magic Arena just against randoms, but kind of because I have no one to play it with in person here. So it's more just making up for that. But yeah, the appeal of it to me was that, we could all play online while we're living in different cities, which is often the case now.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't noticed if Gwent has specific player mode, like pick your
Hmm.
friends or add their friend code or whatever it is. But I also haven't gone looking for it, to be honest. So that might be something new. Uh, Now, I mentioned I was surprised it hadn't come to mobile sooner. And I've been playing another game that I I'm surprised it's taken so long to get to this platform, and that is Mario Kart. It is finally on mobile. It's called Mario Kart Tour. It came out this week. Once it was made available, the server was immediately down. I noticed a few people post about it, and I couldn't do anything for a while, but that's all right. I finally got into it, and I think it's another case of Nintendo haven't really figured out mobile games yet. I don't know if you played any of the other ones. There was a Super Mario game that was their first one that everybody played for all of about a week, and then most people dropped off of.
Right, it was kind of
And
like
then,
it was like an endless runner type thing, wasn't it? Where he's always moving and you just like jump and things like that.
yeah, it wasn't an endless runner. There were definitely stages, but
Mm,
he did move for you, and you just did the jumping.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I don't remember it too clearly because I bounced off of it really quickly, but you had to kind of get a certain amount of gems or whatever to be able to move on. And there was something like you could only play it so many times, or there were lots of restrictions that is typical for mobile games, but you
Yeah.
expect better of Nintendo, or at least I did.
Hmm.
And then they've done another one that's kind of like a matching or a dropping piece one. It's like a Doctor Mario
Okay.
thing.
Yep. Yep.
I didn't even try that one. It seemed like there's 1,000 different versions of that game, and I don't need the Mario skin. But Mario Kart is just about their flagship game at this point, right? Like, people still love your standard Mario worlds and stuff, but I feel like the audience is so much broader for Mario Kart. It's like the party racing game, yeah?
Hmm.
So I was pretty excited to get into this because, as you know from previous episodes, I've been getting back into racing on mobile devices. But this one, it's really not there, and I am kind of shocked. Like, for a start, it plays in portrait mode, and I think they've tried to design it so that you only have to use one hand if you just want to hold the phone in one hand. But essentially, it always accelerates, so you don't accelerate or brake or do anything like that. And you drag your thumb from side to side to turn. But it's not like if I drag my thumb from one side where I'm turning into the center, he straightens up. That doesn't happen. You drag it to one side and he kind of goes into a drift turn, and then you let go, and it's kind of meant to. It says at the start, if you lift your finger off the screen, it will just proceed straight down the track, but it does not do that. It is really hard to handle. You kind of have to turn really hard and then kind of turn back the other way a little bit and then try to get the turn right until you're facing in the middle.
Okay.
And of course, the the NPC characters you're racing against don't seem to have to do that because the computer can put them where they want to, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't handle well. From playing it a bit, I've learnt that you want to turn away from the corner so that you can then turn hard into the corner so that you're not taking every corner really wide trying to get it to turn. But then it's got stuff like you swipe up as you're going over a jump to like do the little flippy trick or whatever, to get boost when you land. That's pretty
Hmm.
standard for Mario Kart. But also you just tap the screen once when you want to fire your
Like item.
power up. Yeah. So if I swipe up to go over a jump and I'm holding an item, because it's a quick action, often it reads that as me tapping it. And so I'll just fire my item as I'm going over this jump. It's just the handling's not quite there. And like Mario Kart is it's pretty simple and it's pretty fun, and like it scales, depending on 50, 100, 150cc, how hard they race against you. So you can still win pretty easily, but I don't feel like I'm enjoying it. Like when it's chaos, it's not the fun Mario Kart chaos. It's like I'm getting bumped around by the other races, but I don't have enough control to put myself back to where I want to be. Like it's so hard to get my line for a corner that if someone bumps me, I'm spending the next like two corners just trying to get back into the middle of the track. And I feel like there are really good racing games now. And I feel like Nintendo are trying to stand out by not just doing landscape mode, joysticks on the side, or turn the phone or whatever it is. They're trying to, carve out their own thing, but it's to the detriment of it being a fun game to play.
The portrait thing seems kind of weird. Like even the turning the phone thing, that feels like it's a perfect fit for that because that's kind of how. Like I guess I'm thinking more of like the Wii here, perhaps, but with like the wheel with the Wii, that's basically how that
Yeah,
worked, right? You know, it was just you're just using the what are they called, like accelerometers or whatever in the controller when you
yeah,
plug it into the wheel. Or it's just a tilt mechanic. That's it. Like surely
yeah.
it makes perfect sense to
Like they
design
have the
this in the
tech,
same way.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't love racing games when I'm tilting my phone. But I
Hmm.
think for Mario Kart, it makes perfect sense. And because Mario Kart isn't a serious racing game, and it's not that fast as far as a lot of racing games go, I feel like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm still like I'm still playing it. Like I've been playing it for what, five or 6 days now. Yeah, it's weird. Another one is that there only seems to be kind of like 5 or 6 total courses at the moment. Um, and then there's kind of variations on them, or you might do them backwards. But there's not that many courses, which surprises me. So
yeah. It doesn't
yeah,
sound like it's kind of well, maybe not greatly made, but maybe also not fully featured even at this point.
yeah, it's like I said, either Nintendo don't quite have a grasp on what makes a mobile game work, or they don't really care too much, and they're just selling Mario. Like Mario sells, so create a mobile version of that.
Yeah, right. Is it free to play?
I get, yeah, it is. I've been able to unlock heaps of stuff without having to pay anything. It's again, you can pay to get more gems, and then you use the gems to to buy a. So it's they call it firing the pipe, and it's essentially a randomized spend 5, and you might get a racer or a glider or a car.
Right. So a loot box basically.
Yes, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, yeah, that it doesn't sound like you're having heaps of fun with that. So
No.
we're off to a good start with something we're not enjoying, but I know kind of on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've been playing something else which is absolutely not a mobile game and that I believe you are enjoying.
Absolutely. Control. I mentioned last episode that I was about to go downstairs and play that. And I was very excited because it's by Remedy, who make Alan Wake, one of my favorite games, and I have not been disappointed. Um, Anybody who hasn't seen a thing about Control so far, the concept is that you are playing as a young woman named Jessie Faden, who has become the director of the Federal Bureau of Control. And the Federal Bureau of Control is like the FBI, except for supernatural, paranormal sort of stuff. So it's
Yeah.
got a bit of a Twin Peaksy X Files vibe to it. It really leans into just instead of being like Fox Mulder and his small department accept it, and the rest of the bureau kind of raise their eyebrows at them and don't really believe him. This entire bureau is just like all of this craziness is completely normal, and the game really drops you in the deep end because of that. The game box says just what I've said on the back of it. You are Jesse Faden. You are the new director of the Federal Bureau of Control. So you go into the game kind of thinking, all right, I guess I must work for the Bureau and I've just been promoted or something. But it is not that at all. It starts with you walking into the Bureau and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've found the Federal Bureau of Control. People have always denied its existence, and the building's just right here in the middle of New York. I don't understand why I've never seen it before. And then you kind of start walking around, and the building is like abandoned for a start. There's no one around, so you're just kind of walking around, much like in Alan Wake and other games. You're picking up collectibles, and they're like files from other cases and stuff. So you're kind of getting a feel for the game and the world it's set in. And you kind of are walking around, and you meet a janitor who talks really cryptically to you. You're like, this is really weird. He's just like, oh, you're here for the job interview. Just keep going through there to the elevator. you go through and you end up back where you started, but there's an elevator where there was just a blank wall before. And so I instantly decided to retrace my steps, and I couldn't get back to where I started. There was basically a dead end. So I had to go through this elevator. And that really sets you up straight away for what this game is going to be. It's
Yeah,
going to Sorry, yep, go.
that sounds like super trippy right off the bat.
Right off the bat, yeah. And there's already been, by that point, like a couple of kind of cutscenes. And they're kind of really leaning into this is a weird place and it is not bound by the natural laws of science, nor even societal expectations. Like, you see on the wall a big framed picture of the director. And you're like, well, that makes sense. And then next to it, there is a big framed picture of the janitor you just spoke to, but with his back to the viewpoint of it.
Yeah,
It's
right.
really, really strange. And then this is all kind of in the trailer. This is the very opening of it, so it might be a little bit spoilery, but it's like the first 10 minutes of the game, so I don't think it's giving anything away. And I feel like I need to set this up because I'm very quickly going to say, and now I'm not going to say anything else because you should discover it all yourself. But when you finally make it to the director's office, you find his body, and it looks like he's committed suicide. You pick up the gun with which he's done it, and that gun communicates with you. The weapon is called the service weapon. It is the only weapon you have in the game, and it seems to be sentient to some degree. And also, there is some omnipresent entity in this building known only as the board, and they communicate with you, and they tell you you're the new director, and the director is the only person that can use the service weapon, and they're the only person that can touch a whole bunch of different stuff in this building. And as well as that, without warning, your photos are hanging up all around the place. Director Jesse Faden. And whenever you meet people from the Bureau, they're just like, oh, director, thank you so much. Like, it's just the new status quo and everyone accepts it. And it sounds really weird, but the way the game kind of parcels out all this stuff, like, I got over that really quickly.
Yeah, this
And
sounds like
not even
it's very quickly gone off the deep end here. Like even from
yeah.
where you started about 2 minutes ago, we're already just like it's already like it's just like maxing out the weirdness straight away.
It does. It goes real hard straight away, and then it kind of fills in Jesse's background for you, and then what's going on with the Bureau, like why it's empty and why you've been able to discover it and stuff. I love it. I'm a big fan of these really weird, like the Twin Peaks, where you kind of just have to trust that it's going to make sense. And, not all of it is going to make sense, but the bits you need, you're going to be able to find the answers. This is one that the sound design is excellent because it's actually quite a scary game. It's ostensibly an action game. It's a third-person shooter, and you have powers, so it's a little bit like a third-person Bioshock, I suppose, because you can like use all these different powers, but you've always got your weapon in your other hand. But I would say it's on the borderline of being a horror game. Essentially, there's some unseen force called the Hiss, which is swept through FBC headquarters, and it's kind of possessing people. So some people it's taking control of, so they will attack you, but most of the office workers are kind of all just levitating, floating against the ceiling, and chanting this incantation at all times. It like really puts you on edge.
Yeah.
So you're often alone, but you can just always hear these voices, and it'll get loud at one point, and you'll look up, and there'll just be someone hanging there, and it is real creepy.
As the resident Alan Wake super fan, obviously that's you. How similar is this in tone to Alan Wake? Like, is Alan Wake? I haven't played it. Is it as weird? Is it also kind of like going for a kind of horror vibe?
Yeah, Alan Wake is a horror game too. Alan Wake was pretty scary. This one, there's no mistaking the stylistic similarities. You look at it, and even if it didn't come from the same studio, you'd be like, oh, that's heavily inspired by. But Alan Wake starts with you playing as a normal, sane man, and a couple of weird things happen, and it builds on that, and it builds on that, and it gets really trippy by the end of it. This one dumps you straight in it, and then you kind of find your feet throughout.
Yeah. This one's
And
really trippy after 10 minutes.
this one's really trippy after, like, it says the title of the game. Like, yeah. And it's interesting because it's like everything's gone wrong in FBC headquarters, but it would have been insanity for the uninitiated even before everything went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Their headquarters is called the Oldest House, and it's like this building which is bigger and bigger and bigger the deeper you go into it, but from the outside it just looks like a normal building in the skyline of New York, and that's if you can see it. Most people don't notice it, and it can shift around without you realizing, as I've already mentioned, and that's just accepted. And everybody in there is just like, oh yeah, so you just need to go to communications department. You get to communications department and it's blocked off, so you have to do certain things, and then the building moves around and you now have access. So it's really quite whack. I'm probably not selling it to a lot of people. That sounds like needlessly complex and that they're just being wacky for the sake of it, and but they really do a good job of presenting it and in a way that you are able to accept. It is a supernatural horror game, so you're gonna have to expect some of that. But it's not just like any madness could happen. You just be like, I guess I have to accept this.
In terms of kind of the wackiness of it, is it kind of portrayed as if the people who also work there have got used to this and
Yeah.
so they don't find it weird? Or is there something, I don't know if you can say this because of like spoilers, or is it that there's kind of something wrong and they're not noticing? They've just got used to it.
Okay, so something massive has gone wrong and they're all aware with it. It is like battle stations in there.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I guess I didn't get that. It sounded like maybe it was
Yeah.
a bit of like business as usual, but no.
So there's a lot of madness that they are all used to. Like I mentioned, they just accepted that I am the new director,
Mm-hmm.
even though their director seems to have died as I arrived at the building. Like, you practically hear the gunshot, and then you find him there, and then his body just disappears.
Okay.
Not in front of your eyes. When you go back to the room, it's just gone. And everybody's like, hi, director, rah, rah, rah. They just accept it. It's not a problem for them. Like, your photo has appeared everywhere in the building, and they accept that. However, there is this presence of the hiss, which is possessing people, and basically it's like a FBC civil war. They're kind of like zombie versions of themselves. They've been taken over by this force, and there are some people left alive. Some people are just floating, and they seem just to be husks of themselves and stuff. So things have gone wrong, and they're aware things have gone wrong, and they're panicking because no one's really sure what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But as you move around the building, you find case files and weird rooms where they were doing experiments of stuff that is insane, and that's business as usual. So it's a weird juxtaposition of the two,
Yeah, okay.
Like, for example, I walked into one room, and it was covered in Post-it notes, and I found a file in that room that was just like, this Post-it note keeps replicating itself, and it's covering everything, and I'm unable to do my work, and I really need someone to come and sort this out. Like, it was just like an exasperated email, like an as per my last email, blah, blah, blah. So it seems really mundane in the way they're talking about it, but it's kind of like mental. Like, what do you mean the Post-it notes are just like replicating itself? And I went past one building, and there's a guy sitting in a cell, like a worker who's not been possessed yet, staring at a fridge, and he's like, hey, hello, I need your help. This fridge needs to be observed at all times, and my shift replacement hasn't rocked up. And if I stop looking at the fridge, we don't know what's going to happen.
Right, okay.
It's kind of like, and so that's business as usual. That's been affected by his taking over because his shift replacement hasn't rocked up.
Uh-huh.
And then I went and found his boss, and they were like, oh, dang, I forgot about fridge observation. Silly me. I'll get someone up, like as if that's not weird at all. Like, yeah.
So I've heard a bit about this game before we're talking about it now, and I guess everything you talked about now is kind of like to do with sort of the story and the setting. I have heard a number of times people saying that like this game is like it's an action game. So
Yeah.
what's because I'm not getting action game vibes, from everything
hmm
you're saying. This sounds like some kind of mystery adventure thing. So what's the actual gameplay like then?
Okay, so like I mentioned, it's third person, and you have the service weapon. You can start upgrading the service weapon. So when you first get it, it's just like a pistol. It's just one shot, pretty quick fire, and then you get a weapon mod, and you can swap between it firing like a pistol and it firing like a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get another upgrade that means it fires like a machine gun, and then you can get another one, and it's like a sniper rifle.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Okay.
kind of thing. And then on the other hand, you start accumulating powers. So pretty quickly you get telekinesis, which just allows you to pick up items and fling them, and then you can upgrade that so that you can start flinging your lower leveled enemies, and then you keep upgrading it, and you can catch if they're shooting a grenade at you, you can catch it and throw it back. And then there are other powers like there's teleportation and there's mind control and there's levitating. Did I say that? No, I said yeah. There's a number of different powers. Oh, you can make a shield of stuff around you.
Right.
So that's kind of where I likened it to Bioshock before, because you have like this wheelhouse of abilities that you can kind of upgrade as well,
Mm-hmm.
and you start getting those. And so it is a lot of your gun combat. I suppose it's not unlike the Uncharted series, where you'll walk into an area and it'll be like you'll see the enemy soldiers, or something will happen and they'll start streaming through a door at the other end. You can kind of find cover. You can kind of use the things around you. You can just try and take them head on with shooting and stuff. You can try and be unnoticed. It's not a stealth game, so there's not a lot of opportunity to not be noticed throughout the story. But there have been times where I've run through in a door, seen the place is filled with guys, and backed out before I've locked myself into any kind of combat.
Right. Okay.
Um,
This may
and
sound
found
like a
another way around.
this may sound like a weird comparison, but from some of the gameplay I'd seen of it, when you're using kind of these like telekinesis powers and stuff like that you're talking about, I felt like it almost looked like Force Unleashed or something, like sort of picking people up, throwing things around and stuff like that.
I suppose like there is that similarity, absolutely, especially with Force Unleashed being like a third person as well.
Yeah, with this kind
Um,
of like physicsy powers kind of thing, I
mhm.
guess. There's probably a better comparison I'm not thinking of, but yeah, that was kind of I got vibes of that, which was a bit unexpected actually.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that's a decent likeness. It is an action game because
Hmm.
a lot of the game, like a lot of the chapters kind of end with a boss of sorts. So they don't call it a boss, but it's a guy that's a lot tougher, that has a lot more abilities, or is like something you've not faced before. And so that is it primarily. There is an element of your problem solving to it though, which I always enjoy. Like you'll get to an area and it'll be like you have to get this pump restarted. And so they're never too complex. Normally find the right thing and slot it into the right thing, sort of stuff. But once you start accumulating powers, there is the you're encouraged to return to places you've been before, because perhaps you weren't able to levitate up to an opening that you can now go through, and there might be something in there.
Right, okay.
Um,
Is it kind of like is it sort of open like that? The building is kind of open for you to go around, or does it work in sort of levels?
so
Like traditional
there is
game
a
levels?
yeah. So you're moving as you move through the oldest house. You can unlock like checkpoints. Kind of like if you played the latest Tomb Raider games, you get to a campfire and you go there for the first time, and then you can fast travel between any of the campfires. The cool thing about Control is, whereas it's just kind of meta in Tomb Raider, she doesn't have the power to teleport between campfires. In
Mm-hmm.
Control, she has specifically mentioned that she can do that, and they call them control points, and they've set them up as they're like there's strong frequencies in these parts of the oldest house, and they set up their control points there so that they can stop the oldest house from just moving around on its own. And Jesse mentions that she can teleport through them, and that is new information to the Bureau. They're like, "You can do what now?" And they're like, "We're going to have to run some tests on this." One thing I have I'm now realizing that I forgot to tell you is Jessie has got this thing that she seems like has kind of she's like the host of this thing she calls Polaris. And it's pretty much just the game's explanation for giving you a nav point. Like this thing can kind of sense for her where she needs to go, and it kind of talks to her, and that's how she was able to find the oldest house. And the reason she's at the oldest house is she is looking for her missing brother, who she believes was taken by Control, the Federal Bureau of Control, because they found a slideshow projector when they were kids that let them travel between different dimensions. And obviously, that is a supernatural thing. So the Federal Bureau of Control heard about it. They heard rumors. They came and investigated it. They took it, and they took her brother as well. And in part of their journeys when they were kids, they encountered this thing, which they both have access to, which she calls Polaris. And so that is kind of why she's able to teleport through the control points and stuff. And it kind of talks to her. So you get a lot of inner monologue from her while she's having conversations with other people. Just another interesting thing there.
I like the way it sounds like a lot of the kind of like gameplay features are sort of contextualized in the world. You know, they're not just it's not just there because it's a game and you have fast travel. It's like there's a reason for it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, the things you take for granted as just like the game needs to give me a nav point and tell me where to go. It needs to point me in the right direction. Yeah. This thing just kind of goes, you want to be heading through that door. It kind of will like point it out to you with a little Polaris, like it has a screen effect. It kind of like ripples around the corners of the screen. And you go, all right, thank you. And then it'll talk. It also explains you hearing the inner monologue during conversations rather than just being her inner monologue. It's like she's communicating with Polaris, and then the fast travel thing. So I'm throwing so much at you here. This game is like, it's bonkers in a really good way. One thing I did want to mention though, and something that I absolutely love about this game, is that they have live action filmed so much for it.
Oh, really?
Because the Federal Bureau of Control is like this corporate entity that are doing all of this research, they of course are recording their experiments. And so you'll have like, hi, this is Dr. Casper Darling, and this is experiment 1033, and he's kind of explaining his findings, and you come across a lot of them. And they've kind of done them old-timey. Like, the game sets up that electronics don't work very well in the oldest house, so smart devices don't work. But it's kind of got a really retro feel to it because of that, which makes it kind of timeless. And so there are a lot of these old videos that you come across, and they kind of look like Super 8 videos. It kind of gave me a real Myst and Riven vibe, because you know how like those would have like the recorded videos of the guy saying, I need you to do this and come and find me.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and so it kind of gave me that impression, except they're throughout the game all the time. Progressively, you know, you see things going wrong, and you get them in, much like Alan Wake did, you get some of them in such an order that you're like, oh, that sounds ominous. I'm going to have to keep my eyes peeled for that thing they were talking about. And other times you'll get something like after you've already faced down whatever it is they're talking about. And you're like, well, that would have been good to know. Like, to varying effects.
Right. Okay.
But it gives it, it might just appeal to me, but I really like the almost nostalgic quality it gives the game for me.
So one question I had about it was all the kind of setting and world building and everything like that. I'm not a big fan of action games, like in general, kind of shooter, third person. Like there's the odd one here and there, like Last of Us, that I've got really into, but in general, I'm probably not going to gravitate towards a game like that. Is there enough of that other stuff in Control for it to be worth playing for someone like me, who is not in it for necessarily the gameplay?
If I'm being honest, I think I have to say no.
Okay, yep.
I don't like that I have to say no, because knowing how much you like sci-fi, I think there is a lot in this game for you. Yeah. And there's a lot of your kind of fun, quirky side stuff, and it's not presented like, isn't this so funny and wacky? But it's like I was telling you offline about that one mission I did where I had to go and track down a missing soldier, and they had been sent to collect, to test an item, and whatever it was duplicating this one clock over and over again. So there were just hallways overflowing with this little kind of like clock that would sit on top of a desk, kind of sized clock.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found the item, and it was just pouring clocks out of itself, and I actually had to defeat this item, and the way it would fight back at me would be essentially vomiting these clocks at me, and I'd have to like shield myself from it, because obviously it's flinging wood and metal at me, and that really hurts, you know? And so there's enough interesting kind of like side stuff as well as like your main story, and then I love kind of speculative fiction,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it is straddling the line between horror and sci-fi. There was an old website called spc.org or .net or something, and it was essentially a fake wiki. It was a real wiki, but it was like a fake website for an organization called SPC. I can't remember what it stands for, Paranormal Council or something.
Uh-huh.
And people could submit their own, and it was like creepypasta, essentially. It was all like, you'd submit a report about, for example, from the game, say, someone might have done one about a fridge that needed to be observed at all times, because if you stopped looking at it, all of a sudden, bad things would happen. And it was edited and moderated so that everything was like good quality, and it seemed all like reports. It wasn't like a short story. It was all in report form.
Right.
And I really appreciated that. And that's kind of what this game is doing. It's creating this world and these files, and you're picking up a lot of things like that. Like I picked up one that was about a Chinese lantern that hung in the window of a ramen. It was Japanese, of a ramen store, and everybody was just attracted to it, like almost fatally. Like people were just drawn to this red glow. And it's unclear to me, even having finished this little bit, what it actually did, because the file was written by this guy who had already been ensnared by its attraction.
Uh-huh.
And then I found an addendum later on that said, due to the status of redacted, the original file about this should not be trusted in its entirety. And that's all I got. So I don't really know what it did to them. Like, was it making people obsessed with it? Was it like the Ring from Lord of the Rings kind of situation that everybody tries to claim it for themselves? Or like, I just find it really interesting because I can be a sucker for collectibles in games when they're done well. I like to find them in Uncharted and Tomb Raider for the sake of the numbers game, but I don't really read about what that dagger did or what that bowl was or anything. These ones, I just find reading the reports really, really interesting because it's just a well-made little sci-fi world. Sometimes it's really funny, sometimes it's quite grim, and yeah, it appeals to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So for the sci-fi angle, I think if you can somehow play a demo or watch someone play like the first 20 minutes, see if there's enough in there for you. Because there are some problem-solving bits in it. You often get transported to this place called the Ocean View Motel and Casino. And you get transported there by a magic light switch and through other things.
Of course.
It seems inexplicably linked to the oldest house for some reason. You'll often be transported there by some unseen force, and you have to work out what you need to do to get back to the oldest house. The first time, it's just turning a certain light switch enough times, and there are clues about how to do that. The next time, you have to go into different rooms and make sure they match up, and other times it's doing things in the right order, and then you're able to get back to the oldest house. And it's always different, and I've been there a few times now. So there is the problem-solving stuff. I would say it's like a 75-25 split.
Yeah, right.
For
okay.
how much is shooting guys and how much is doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Have you finished
No, I haven't finished it yet.
Okay. Do you have any idea? Do you get any idea of how long it is?
No, that's one thing I actually really love about it. I'm playing it and I've got no clue about where I am in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like even now that I can kind of get around most of the oldest house, like at first you're kind of stuck on the one level. and then you get access to another level. Now from doing other stuff, I've pretty much got it all unlocked. It kind of eventually you can get anywhere with the elevator before you need to go to these places. But I've got no real indication of where I am in the story, which I really like. You know, maybe later on I'll be like, that seems like probably something pretty huge, so this might be wrapping up. But at the moment, I could be halfway, I could be 2/3, I could only be a quarter of the way through. I'm struggling to grasp where it's going, which is cool. I like the unpredictability of it. So
Right.
yeah,
It sounds like you're enjoying it anyway. Like you said,
oh,
you did throw a lot at me, but I think I took most of it in. But yeah, the impression I get is that this is better than Mario Kart Tour.
yeah. If you take nothing else away from this episode, listeners, it's that Control is better than Mario Kart Tour. But yeah, so I'll report back once I finished it because I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more to say about it. Like, maybe not actually. You know, like there's plenty of stuff that I've specifically kept away from saying because I feel like it's better discovered on your own. But maybe I'll return with my general feelings once I've finished it, and I can let you know then, Paul, if I think it's worth you taking the plunge.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of spoiler heavy stuff that you don't want to get into for that,
No.
but I'd be interested at least to hear spoiler free whether the ending is good, because it feels like a game that, you know, it could be interesting. It could have a really cool ending that explains or doesn't explain all this stuff.
Well, Alan Wake was kind of, it didn't explain everything, and it in fact kind of like, when it ended, I was just like, wait, so what does that mean? Like it kind of, like, did I save my wife? Did I not save my wife? Am I alive or am I dead? And I loved it. Like, it was a really satisfying ending. It's kind of like that. You and I are big believers that not everything needs to be explained, and in many instances, you're better off not trying to explain everything.
Definitely.
And it seems that Remedy definitely understand that with Alan Wake.
Mm-hmm.
I have found a couple of Alan Wake Easter eggs, and it has not given me any further clarity. I was like, that's really cool. I know what they're talking about. Still don't know what happened to my old mate Alan. But yeah, so that's Control. I've been really digging it. I'll let you know what I think about it when I finish it, which hopefully won't be too much longer. I mean, like, I hope the game goes forever, but I doubt it will. So I'll be able to give you my feelings soon. But what have you been playing, Paul? I've been talking at you a whole bunch.
Well, I have been playing something that is not so recent, which is South Park: The Fractured But Whole, which I think we may have mentioned this last week. We're coming full circle here because you talked about this on the very first episode of Disc and Dice, and it has taken me 22 episodes to get around to playing this game. Now, just for context, I played South Park Stick of Truth when it first came out. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was sort of a surprisingly good RPG. When you hear that there's a South Park themed RPG coming out, I think the last thing you expect is for it to have interesting RPG systems. I think you expect it to be full of South Park jokes and simple combat. Stick of Truth, I think, well, it kind of punched above its weight in terms of those expectations. For me, it probably dragged on a bit too long, and by the end of it, I was very, very ready for it to be over. So that was kind of my kind of impressions of Stick of Truth. And
I don't remember that, but I remember kind of getting very over the back and forth of it, like walking around that map so much, you know? But by the end of it, that's what I was tired of. I didn't think the story got tired, though, from memory. But anyway, go on.
Right, yeah. Like, I was enjoying Stick of Truth enough that I kind of tried to do everything. So I'd sort of try to get every Chin Pokemon and do every side quest, which in hindsight I think was probably a mistake for a game like that. And it's affected how I have approached Fractured But Whole. And I guess I mean that this world, you know, the South Park world, it's not interesting enough for me to do every side quest and, you know, find every little secret. It's kind of like more like, you know, you should spend as much time there as you feel like you need to. There's no reason to go around and find sort of every little thing in the game. You know, it's not that kind of RPG world. It's not like a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age where if you do every side quest and look in every container, you'll get the lore of the world. It's like, no, if you look in a container, you'll just get like an item which has like a 2 word reference to a South Park episode. And like, that's it.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. The difference is in Dragon Age, everything is new for you, and you're discovering things. Whereas
Hmm.
most of the side things in those games, from memory, are little bits like references to episodes that you, Paul, in particular, would know quite well. So you'd
Uh-huh.
be like, "Oh, yeah, I know what they're talking about. I remember." But apart from that, it's like it's not new. It's not like, "Oh, that's a really interesting idea or a bit of lore or whatever." It's just, yeah, okay, cool. That's that joke that I heard like 3 seasons ago, which
Right.
is still
Yeah.
funny. But like, I went out of my way to do this whole side quest, and that was the payoff. So
Yeah, yeah. Like even for someone who's a big South Park fan like me and like you are as well, I think the rewards it's not always worth it for that. So in terms of Fracture But Whole, I went into this with this in mind, remembering that Stick of Truth really kind of dragged me after a while, and that I'd heard Fracture But Whole was longer. So
mhm.
I've gone into it and been more, I guess I would say, direct. So when I get a main quest mission, I pretty much go straight for that. And I haven't been stopping to do things like explore the town or do all the side quests. I will do a side quest if I find it interesting. So if like the character who's given me the side quest is a South Park favorite of mine, I'll do the quest because I might get some funny jokes from them. But if it's just like, go and collect these 5 things from a character who I don't care about, I pretty much just won't do it. I'll just ignore it. And it's been good actually because as is the case with most games anyway, the main quest sort of sends you to all the places on the map as it is. So,
Yeah,
without needing to go out of my way, I kind of get to explore everywhere bit by bit. In another kind of RPG that was a more sort of well realized world and took itself kind of more seriously, I probably would have spent a lot of time just exploring. But yeah, I've been kind of just straight into the main quest, stop and do other things when they interest me. But if they don't, I kind of have no, what's the word I'm looking for? I've got no kind of like hang ups about just
hmm,
bailing on a side quest. Being halfway through collecting something for a side quest and just forget about that. Now go on to something else. Maybe I'll never finish that. Um, I guess just to say a little bit about the game itself, it's and how it differs from Stick of Truth. I think the most obvious difference for me is the combat system, which has been made much more complex from Stick of Truth. So it uses it's turn-based, just like Stick of Truth was, but you actually have a grid now to fight on, whereas Stick of Truth just kind of had your characters sort of just kind of in the world, and it was turn-based, but it wasn't sort of as organized as this. So this time you have a grid, you have all the different abilities that your characters have, and the thing that has surprised me the most is how deep and interesting this fight system is. So I'm about 20
yeah,
hours into the game, and I remember with Stick of Truth, I absolutely got sick of the combat system, as unexpectedly good as it was. By the time I was this far into Stick of Truth, I was definitely just happy to cruise through every battle as quick as possible. But in Fractured But Whole, I am getting into fights that I don't need to do just because I'll have got a new character and they'll have a new ability, and I'll think like, oh, I want to get into a battle with this character so I can see how it works with this other ability that I have on this other character. And there are so many possibilities for kind of complementing and synergizing the abilities of your characters. So, for example, um, I have a power up that you basically get. You've got these different things that you can kind of boost with power ups, and one of those things is knockback. So you can boost the knockback damage that your characters do. And the way knockback works is if you hit an enemy with knockback, they get knocked back. If there is one of your characters standing in their path, they will be knocked back into that character and then take damage again. So you can kind of deal like a little bit of double damage to someone. I got a bunch of these upgrades with bonus knockback damage. And so then I kind of started min maxing my party in a way that I don't often do in RPGs. I kind of got all my knockback power ups and put them all together so I had maximized my knockback. And then I looked through my roster of characters and thought, who has knockback abilities so I can bring all these guys in together? And at the moment, I have this team of four. I have one healer, but then all of the others are basically just there for knockbacks. And what I just try and do is I try to get characters either side of an enemy and then do a knockback ability so it hits the other one, and my knockback damage is boosted by like 170% or something. And I'm really enjoying the kind of combat puzzle of the game. And I think it's because in other RPGs where the story and the world is really rich and engaging, I cannot help but roleplay. So I will not pick my party based on what is best for combat. I will pick my party based on the kind of character I think, would be there in that situation. I will take the worst character in the game if I feel like they have a good relationship with another character and they should be there and it makes sense in the world. South Park, I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the story. I don't care about like the role playing aspect of the world. So I'm kind of really into just the min maxing of combat, which I did not expect going into this.
I thought you were about to go the opposite way with it, because obviously there's the main four friends
mm,
and stuff, and people not liking Cartman and Butters being like a suck up to Cartman and stuff like that. But no, you went the complete opposite direction with it.
yeah, really went the opposite direction because I just feel like there's not enough there in like the South Park world for that to matter. Like all the relationships can just change instantly if they need them to. So that's kind of how I've approached it. The fights actually go for quite a while, I've found, which is also a bit unexpected. That I will often get into a fight and I will be in it for like 5 or 10 minutes, sort of working out my strategy, and more enemies will come in, and there'll be sort of reinforcements you have to fight and things like that. Like, I kind of can't emphasize enough how much this is like, it's like a real RPG fighting system in a way that I think is deeper and more complex than many much more serious RPGs, which is very cool. Um, I do have to say that at the beginning of the game and even now, the whole thing it is a little bit difficult to get your head around. I don't think the game really does a great job of explaining how everything works. It is not until you are multiple hours into the game that you gain the ability to see how much damage your attacks do. So
Oh,
before that, you can see all your attacks, but all you kind of see is, do they do damage? Do they do knockback? That kind of thing. It doesn't tell you how much damage. So in the midst of combat, when you go to use ability, it will tell you how much damage it will do to this character. But if you're out of combat and you're trying to pick your party, there is no way to see which abilities do more. And yeah, it takes like 5 or 6 hours to get to the point where you actually get the kind of tab on your smartphone, which is basically how the menu works, that gives you access to seeing people's abilities. And there's just a bunch of things like that. I really had to kind of dig into some of the help menus to find out how some of the status effects worked, which is not ideal. And I guess part of this is maybe that they're not expecting people to care quite as much.
mm-hmm.
It's a South Park game. They're expecting people to just kind of enjoy the jokes and breeze through. But considering how much I got into the combat, I do wish that it was all a bit more kind of open about how the actual game systems worked. But in general, that's a minor criticism because I really, really love the combat system in there. I also really like just the general structure that the game uses, which is a
Mm-hmm.
day-night cycle where the days are basically open world and you can run around the town, do whatever stuff you want, do your side missions as much as you feel like. And then the nights are always a very focused linear mission. And I found this to be a really nice change of pace compared to Stick of Truth. You mentioned early on, Timmy, that Stick of Truth gets really tiring because you got to go to one side of the town, then run back to the other, and then you have to go back from where you came from and then go somewhere else. And you spend so much of your time just backtracking around the town. Fractured But Whole definitely suffers from that in the daytime cycle, but it's kind of nice when you get to a mission which ends the day, usually a main quest mission, and then you go to the night cycle, and the night cycle is just like, this is the thing you have to do. you have to go to this place with your whole team and you have to deal with this big problem. And I've really kind of enjoyed that as a way of keeping the game fresh.
I had forgotten that it did that, and
Hmm.
when you mentioned it, I kind of remembered at times being frustrated, not realizing that doing that mission was about to end the day,
Yeah.
and like wanting to go off and and do another mission that lets me do collectibles and stuff in the meantime. But I do also remember really enjoying those nighttime missions specifically. So I got over each time that happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I haven't had any point yet where it's like locked out any side quests as a result. Like every time I go to nighttime and it comes back to day, everything's still there. Like I haven't finished the game yet, so maybe there will be a point where it tells you, if you go on this mission, you won't be able to do your side quests. RPGs often have that kind of end game warning, but so far it's all pretty open. You don't kind of lose any content by doing that. The other thing I wanted to mention about kind of game systems was the class system. Now, I mentioned to you, Timmy, offline in our group chat that I was a little bit iffy on the class system at first because it basically lets you switch classes at will at any point in the game. And I don't in general like this system. It's in a few RPGs that where you can do this kind of thing because I think it kind of lessens your engagement and your attachment to your character. I feel like if I choose to play as like a warrior, I don't want to get 10 hours into the game and be like, oh, I'm going to be a mage now because it does better damage. Like, I want to feel like I am playing as that character. Maybe it's because South Park doesn't take itself so seriously, but maybe it's also because just the classes themselves are perhaps not as deep as a normal RPG. But I've actually been quite enjoying being able to switch classes now, especially now that I've got more of the combat system unlocked. If I get a bunch of upgrades, like I said before, that boost an ability like knockback, it's really cool to then be able to go and look at the other classes. And I'm up to the point now where I can triple class. I can choose 3 different classes and mix their abilities. I can go in there and see, okay, which ones have good knockback abilities. That's what I'm going to switch to now, so that I can kind of get the most out of those upgrades. So
Yeah.
it's quite a cool system, I think, for this game specifically, for a game where kind of role playing is not at the forefront. I think it works quite well.
I also think like it works thematically with like you are role playing finger quotes
Hmm.
as like 10-year-old children who are just playing a superhero game with their friends, and you'll watch adults live action role playing and you'll be like, how did that person know that they could just yell that they've got like the right antidote for whatever the other person just yelled at them, and it seems silly then, let alone when you're a kid and you're just making stuff up. The fact that, there's suddenly 3 classes at once and they can swap them whenever they want, that just makes sense. That's how kids play, right? There's always one kid that can't deal with losing. So all of a sudden he's got an invisibility cloak that he didn't have a minute ago kind of thing.
Right, right. I think I remember from Stick of Truth, or maybe it was from a South Park episode where like Cartman's chosen power was to have all the powers that he wanted to have.
Exactly. So yeah, that kind of carries on to this.
Yeah.
And like while you bring up Stick of Truth again, I mentioned when you brought this up last episode that when I played Fractured But Whole, I played it straight after Stick of Truth, and I really enjoyed Stick of Truth more. But I couldn't be sure if that was because I played 2 massive South Park themed RPGs back to back, or if it was that Stick of Truth was actually better.
Hmm.
What are you feeling? Like you've obviously got a lot of distance, and perhaps you don't remember Stick of Truth clearly enough to also provide an objective answer there. But what are your feelings? Stick of Truth v Fractured But Whole.
I think it was interesting that you like Stick of Truth more. I kind of thought about how, as I said earlier, I really got sick of Stick of Truth after a while,
Hmm.
and I feel like I would not have wanted to play this game. I would not have wanted to play 2 games like this back to back. I don't feel like I would have enjoyed that. So I did wonder whether that played into how you felt about Fractured But Whole. I would probably say, in general, I'm enjoying this one more, mainly because I think the combat system and kind of the skills and abilities are more interesting than in Stick of Truth. It's also, I think, because I'm moving through it a bit faster. I'm not kind of getting bogged down in side missions, so that plays into it as well. Um, the story, I guess, which is the other thing that can be talked about. To be honest, I don't think the story is. I don't think the story was that special in Stick of Truth. I don't think the story
Hmm.
is that special here. I should mention, actually, I haven't said this at all. The game is superhero themed. So Stick of Truth was fantasy themed. It was like South Park's sort of Lord of the Rings parody. And Fractured But Whole is their Marvel Cinematic Universe parody. And I have to say, they nail the parody so many times.
Oh,
Um,
don't they just? And
yeah,
because when you say specifically that it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe parody, it's because when they're hanging out in whichever kid's basement it is, planning out what games they're going to play, they're planning it out like the MCU. They're saying, so what we're going to have first of all is the Coon, and then we're going to have, I forget all of their names now, but they each get their own kind of like solo movie or
uh
solo
huh.
game, and then they're going to come together in the Coon and Friends, which is like the
Like
Avengers and
Avengers.
stuff, and yeah,
And
and
then
they
they get
they
their
have
like
phases and whatnot.
yeah, their
Yeah.
Netflix spin-off show and things like that.
Hmm.
There's all those kind of
Hmm.
things. Um, they
It's all a plan, and at the same time, they managed to have the Marvel versus DC rivalry as well, because like the
right.
kids splinter off because they don't like Cartman's plan and him calling the shots about when they get to have their turn and stuff, and so then they're doing their own one.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole thing is almost framed as a little bit of a sort of civil war thing that's going on between these
Yeah.
two groups of superheroes. Like that stuff is good. Like the parody is really spot on, as South Park tends to be, in my opinion. I think the general story though is pretty standard. I don't think there's anything particularly special about it. Um, there's lots and lots of references to the show, and like this is something I might sort of come back to at the end. But I think if you're not a South Park fan, so much of this will go over your head that it may not even be worth it at all. Like even a lot of the kind of main characters in the story are given very little introduction. You're just kind of supposed to get it because you've watched South Park.
Hmm.
You know why this character is funny. You know why this joke is funny, and things like that. In terms of the story as well, I have to say that the toilet humor is probably a bit much in this game. I can't remember how I felt about it in Stick of Truth, but I get really sick of kind of the sort of superpower that your character has is that he's got really powerful farts and things like that. It's just I don't know, it's wearing a bit thin on me. Like the kind of social commentary stuff that's in there that South Park does, I think, really well. That stuff is spot on. It's really good. The kind of juvenile humor thing, it's not really doing it for me, and I think they many times it's too much, and I could really do without it. Apart from those things, the other thing I wanted to mention was the music. I think this game absolutely nails its music in so many different ways. So it has kind of generic superhero movie music, which is way too spot on. And there have been times when I have been listening to it and playing, and I have genuinely thought, have they used like a track from the Avengers here? Because this sounds like it is taken straight from a Marvel movie and put in here. And then different situations in the game that you're in have these different kind of themed music, and some of it is absolutely fantastic. It's maybe not surprising because the South Park guys are kind of known for their musical stuff just as much as South Park, but yeah, I'm really impressed with a lot of even just a lot of the instrumental background stuff that they use for different fights and different scenarios that you're in. I think some of it's like super catchy, really kind of nails the tone. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, I've just started like looking up the guys who did the scores
Yeah,
for
right.
these games, because I do remember absolutely loving the music as well. And there's nothing too striking here. Like both of them have worked on the soundtracks for shows like Better Call Saul and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
then a few movies of questionable quality, but sounds like they're just waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah, like it's a lot of it is imitation. Like they've obviously been told like, just copy that Avengers music, but they they get it perfect. And it's not a parody, it's like a legit attempt to capture that same style.
Mm.
And like in my opinion, outside sort of a couple of key themes in Marvel movies, I think the music is very, very generic across the movies. You could take the soundtrack from most of them and put it into another one, and you'd never notice. And I think they kind of nail that kind of sound. And there's just something about it, something about like superhero movie music that they really nail there. So it's not like they're doing anything particularly impressive. It's just the thing they're trying to imitate. The imitation is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I think they have the benefit of like it can sound like other things. I feel like a lot of
Hmm.
composers go into superhero movies trying to, just match it to what's happening on the screen or trying to carve out like a famous theme for themselves, and maybe only the Avengers theme itself has nailed that from Marvel.
Hmm. Hmm.
But because these guys are kind of it's meant to be aping those obvious kind of themes and trends and stuff from that music. They've got a bit more freedom to just go with the obvious choices. But yeah, I remember the same thing, just the way the music builds and falls off and stuff. I was like, that is spot on. That that could not be more like an actual like superhero movie if it tried.
Yeah, yeah, and there's some real funny ones in there as well, which sort of some kind of like classic South Park ridiculous song stuff, which is also pretty enjoyable. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is not a positive, is I'm playing this game on PC, and I think you would have to say that this is kind of a bit of a crappy port to PC. This game is clearly made to be played with a controller, and they have not really taken the time to make certain systems in the game work with a mouse and keyboard. So, for example, there's a toilet mini game, which, again, this is another one of those things where I just feel like you could cut this from the game and you lose absolutely nothing. Basically, there is an ongoing kind of side quest to like take a shit in everyone's toilet in the game, and I just didn't find it particularly interesting at all. But on
See,
PC,
I didn't find that one. I didn't find that one. Sorry to interrupt you.
mhm,
I didn't find that like particularly funny, right? I didn't really see it as them trying to be particularly funny though, and it was just a numbers game for me. I was just achievement hunting in that one, to be completely honest. Like, and so I've achievement hunted stuff I didn't care about enough times that I didn't hold this one against South Park, like against Matt and Trey at all, right? Because I've gone around countless worlds shooting like little wooden birds off the top of houses in fantasy games or whatever that does nothing and takes no time from the developers really. And at least I don't know this was on brand for South Park. So
yeah, like it's if it was just that, if you kind of walked up and pressed a button and you were done, that would be fine. But they turn it into like a long mini game where it's like you kind of have to like build up your farts and things like that, and like I don't know. It's just maybe my tastes have changed, but I felt that I could do without it. But my point was going to be that on PC, the controls are awful, absolutely awful for this mini game, to the point where if the difficulty of the toilet is high, it's basically impossible for me anyway. It's basically impossible
oh
for me to do because the whole thing is built around you having like the analog control of directional sticks on a controller, and
yeah,
when you have
right.
the kind of digital like binary PC keyboard sort of thing going on, it just doesn't work. And there are a couple of other situations in the game like this as well. Like there are things like it's a really minor thing, but when you like change out of your costume, you're supposed to go like left and right as if you're spinning.
Hmm.
When you do that on PC, because I guess I don't know, I think the way it's supposed to work is it's kind of supposed to pick up that you're sliding slowly from left to right, moving an analog stick. But because on PC you're just pressing left, right, left, right, left, right, oftentimes I will do it and the character will just kind of slow down and speed up and then slow down and speed up, and I'll have to sort of find the sweet spot to kind of switch out of costume. And it's a tiny minor thing and it doesn't happen many times throughout the game, but there just are situations like that where you just realize that they haven't bothered at all to take into account how this will play on PC. There's also a lot of key bindings which are absolutely absurd. So there are some things where it'll say, okay, press this key now, and you'll already be holding two other keys, and you'll just look at it and be like, I physically can't press this key without like stopping, starting again, and having to kind of plan out where I will put my fingers so that I can even reach the other key that needs to be pressed.
Use your nose, Paul. Problem solving.
Exactly. Just like throw my arm across the keyboard. So there's some stuff like that
Yeah.
which is not great. It doesn't detract heaps from the game. Like the toilet mini game, even if I was interested in it, like I've just stopped doing it completely. I just don't even bother with it because it's so frustrating to do on a mouse and keyboard.
And you're not at all interested in plugging a controller into your PC?
Well, at the moment I don't have one, so maybe if I
Okay.
had a controller here, I would do that. But it isn't an option right now. I think I would have to say that if there is a third South Park game, I will definitely play it on a console because
Yeah.
yeah, that I don't think you would lose anything at all playing this on a console. Like there is nothing in the game that I feel is better with a mouse and keyboard. You know, often with this kind of RPG, there's something that having a mouse to have directional control is really useful for.
It's
There's nothing like
normally
that.
it's normally managing your inventory is better with a mouse.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
fantasy games, you just end up with RPGs. You just end up with so much crap to cycle through. But
Right, but this is even one of
yeah.
those cases where none of that is optimized. So
Yeah.
even your inventory, it's almost worse with the mouse and keyboard. And the worst one is probably the main map. You can't sort of scroll and zoom the way you could with a mouse and keyboard. You have to drag your mouse to like the side of the screen for it to scroll across.
Right.
It's not great for that stuff. I've got used to it. Um, if other aspects of the game were worse, I probably would have stopped playing because this would piss me off. But yeah, the rest of the game is good enough that I'm not that worried. Anyway, that's just about all I have to say about South Park. I guess just in conclusion, I would say that if you like South Park, then I'd probably recommend this game. If you really don't like South Park, like actively dislike it, like definitely don't play this game because you are not going to enjoy anything about it. There is nothing redeeming. Um, if you kind of don't watch South Park and don't really care about it, I certainly wouldn't come into this and play it for the story because I just think it's not going to mean anything. And like I said early on, strangely enough, I would probably also say that this game would be good for someone if they are solely interested in the combat mechanics, because in a strange way, I find that they are actually deep enough to just sort of stand on their own, that you can really get into the min-maxing there and enjoy that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if this one is part of a humble bundle, or perhaps you can get it as a PS Plus game or something like that, sounds like a absolutely give it a crack. Otherwise, unless you really love South Park, perhaps not for you.
Yes, indeed. That sounds like good advice there. The only other thing I've been playing in the last couple of weeks is I've been playing a couple of card games, or board/card games, which we have mentioned before, but I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on again, which are Spyfall and Avalon. So Spyfall is
Okay.
one which historically, and we've talked about it before, I have not been the biggest fan of, but I
Yes, you kind of seem to have warmed up to that at times. Like, and I don't know when it happened either, because we played it a bunch of times, and it was your favorite way to press my buttons. You would always just talk about it being a lousy game just to get a reaction, and then it just kind of like came up a few times where you had been playing it and enjoying it, and just kind of crept into one of your regulars.
it
So what's
has
happened there?
it has, and I think this is sort of I've been thinking about these two games kind of in comparison to each other, and I think they're both deception games, sort of very similar mechanics in a lot of ways, but there's sort of there's some specific differences about them which, to me at least, in my opinion, have affected my enjoyment. I have been playing Spyfall with the same group of people for a few weeks, and
Okay.
I think that this, for me, has been a massive reason why I have started to enjoy it so much. Because the main mechanic of Spyfall, very, very briefly, is one person is the spy, everyone else is not, and the spy has to guess where the other people are, and the other people have to guess who is the spy. and they do it by asking each other questions. And so the main mechanic of the game is asking questions. And I find that Spyfall with new players is not fun because if people are bad at asking questions, the game is bad. This I know, like
And
you, I know you
it's
possibly disagree on this, but for me, this has been my impression.
but it's not even about being bad at asking questions. People don't want to get it wrong. They feel like I don't know what to ask. I don't
Hmm.
know. What's a good question? Like people don't trust themselves. So I feel like even with people that will end up being very good at it, the first couple of games can be a bit of a dud.
Yeah, and that's what I have always found. I think when I have played Spyfall, it's always been with at least half a group of people who are playing it for the first time, and I don't find that I enjoy it that much. But playing it with the same group of people for quite a while, everyone has been getting better at asking questions, getting used to sort of what questions work, what questions aren't so useful. You learn relatively quickly that yes, no questions are bad. That if you ask
Hmm.
someone a yes, no question, no one benefits from that. Like, that's an objectively bad question in Spyfall.
Yeah,
um, and it's been interesting seeing what questions are useful. So I've started to tend towards questions based on your senses. So asking things like, what can you see? What does this place smell like? You know, what kind of sounds can you hear? That
yeah,
these are kind of interesting because it's about asking questions which they give enough room for the person to answer with more than yes or no, but
yeah,
they don't lock it in so completely that you give the location away if you're not playing as the
yeah.
spy.
Me personally, I tend to lean towards questions about routines because like the
Mm-hmm.
places differ between like vehicles like trains and aeroplanes and space stations and stuff like that. But then also there's stuff like beaches or shopping centers or schools. If
Mm-hmm.
I say something like, "What time are you expecting to be here till?" You know, they can either give a time that is something like a school hour or a shopping thing, or they can try and be a bit more. They can slip up and make it really obvious, or they can go a bit more cryptic with it, and it kind of again makes them think about where am I, when would I be likely to be here, how can I answer this? Yeah,
Right, yeah. Like that's a good example as well. That kind of thing. So playing with regular people has made me enjoy that a lot more because we've all got better at that process, and I think the game is just better the more you play it. The more that
yeah,
the people learn how to play it and they learn which questions are good, which questions are useful, the game just becomes kind of like exponentially better each time. Whereas Avalon, on the other hand, a game that again we have talked about a lot on the show, very briefly, it's a game where a couple of the players are evil, the rest of the players are good, and they don't know who the evil players are. The evil players have to kind of secretly work together to basically sabotage the game, and the good characters have to try and keep the evil players off the team without knowing who they are. It's probably, I think there's a good chance this is maybe my number one tabletop game because it has just remained such a staple of our gaming group for so many years. Um, the contrast with Avalon, I think, is that Avalon is so great with new players that I love
mm,
playing Avalon with a group of people who have never played before. And that's been my recent experience with Avalon, is introducing it to a group of about myself and five others who had never ever played it. And I know we have talked about this before, Timmy. I don't know if it was on the pod, but some people, when they explain Avalon, they give all the strategies as they explain the game. So they give the rules and then they say to new players, so you could do this in this situation, you could do this in this situation. And I've always been very
mm,
firmly against that. I think half the fun of Avalon is you give people the rules and then you just let them play and you let them slowly figure out that, like, oh, as an evil person, I can pretend to be good if I need to be, and
mm.
that kind of thing.
To be fair, it also took us introducing the game to new people at least 3 or 4 times before we really grasped that ourselves. Like we were very excited to pass on our learnings the first few times we introduced it to new people.
That's true.
So yeah, fair enough that like we have had instances when we have had to, you and I specifically have had to snap and cut people off because they're about to jump in to be like, and you don't have to, you can do. But like, no, 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 no. Like, we know what you're about to say.
Mm-hmm.
Let them discover it themselves. Because every now and again, like a player who will have put that together quickly themselves and have the advantage of being able to play dumb and play like, this is my first game, so I don't know what I'm doing, but they really like caught on very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They lose any advantage from doing that because all of a sudden everyone else at the table has had, oh, you can do this put in front of them. And it also means the new players, instead of like trying to read people and understand what's going on around them, they're looking for that specific scenario that somebody has pointed out already.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's like you exactly kind of nailed it there, that you want those scenarios to occur organically, and for that to be how people realize this can be done, or that this can happen, rather than have them be given 5 scenarios before the game starts and then to be looking for them.
Yeah, 100%. Half of the enjoyment of that game is kind of like discovering it for yourself. And I suppose that's what you're saying. You're getting to relive that enjoyment by introducing it to new people as well.
Exactly, and I think that's the difference for me. It's that Avalon, the process of learning, I think, is the fun of the game. So as a quick example, there was like a player who was Merlin in the first game, and I was evil, and it was Merlin is a player who knows who the evil characters are and has to kind of hint at them, and that person, it was very clear that they were Merlin throughout the game, and they lost the game as a result of that. Then the next game we played, they happened to be Merlin again, and they changed their strategy significantly to the point where they were making mistakes on purpose to throw people off their trail as being Merlin, and it worked, and their team won the game in the end, and no one picked up that they were Merlin. And I think that process of learning is part of the fun, whereas I feel like in Spyfall, I feel like you almost have to push through the learning, and then you get to the point where the game is good.
Well, we invented house rules for Spyfall.
We did.
Specifically because we have always played with new people. Like, making it so that when you ask someone a question about their location, you have to hand them the rule book with the pictures of all the locations, and everybody is expected to at least glance at it to feign like they need to look at the locations. Because the spy not knowing any of the locations is a massive disadvantage. You're getting to that point now, it sounds like, that you could just deal the cards and everybody sit back and just look at each other, and there's no like, I don't know, is there like a circus in this game, or am I like,
Yeah. Like we still play that rule of, whoever asks the question and answers should have the locations in front. But another thing I think with early Spyfall games is that you almost run out of time to ask questions, because people are sitting there for like a minute trying to think. And we don't have that problem so much now. That now we play with the time limits that the game suggests, which I think when I had played with you before, maybe in our early games, we had played with like longer time limits, or we had sort of house rules as well about being able to pause at certain points, just things like that. Now we play with like 8 minutes, like the game suggests, and everyone gets at least 2 or 3 questions in that time, which when you first play it, it's really not how it works, because everyone is kind of, you're almost dreading when someone asks you a question, not because you have to answer, but because you have to ask the next question. But yeah, those are basically my thoughts on Spyfall and Avalon. Again, 2 things we've talked about a lot, but yeah, there were just some similarities I thought in that, and an interesting comparison. So that is about all that I have been playing since the last episode, actually.
Awesome. Well, that's got me very keen to play some more games, and especially with PAX coming and their games library that you can kind of lend and play with your friends while you're all there. I'm hoping to discover some new things not this weekend, the weekend after, but before the next episode. So I guess that lends us straight into what we're hoping to play before next we record. So Paul, was there anything you've got your eye on at PAX or otherwise?
There's nothing specific at PAX. Probably I'm actually looking to play some things like maybe a bit of Magic or Keyforge with you and a couple of other people, because it's been a long time since I've played that in person with you guys. So looking forward to a few of those old favourites. Obviously, finishing off South Park is also the plan, but I will have my desktop PC and my consoles back in my possession very soon, and I'm looking to catch up on a couple of things there actually. The main one is probably the Witcher 3 expansions. We have talked many times on this show about how much we love The Witcher 3, but I have not had a system that can play the expansions for about a year and a half now. So I am very keen to get back to those. It's actually kind of fun that, you almost think that I might be like upset that I couldn't finish playing this game that is the greatest game I've ever played. But in a way, I kind of like that a year or 2 years has passed since I finished that game, and there's still this little bit of it waiting for me. Like there's still a little bit of The Witcher 3 that I get to play again. It's like the game is not actually finished for me yet, and that's kind of exciting.
Yes. See, I don't find it weird at all. I am ludicrously jealous.
Yeah, exactly.
if 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 there wasn't so much stuff coming out that I want to play, and then Cyberpunk on the horizon as well, I would be seriously considering another playthrough. But it's a
Yeah,
big commitment, and games just keep coming.
they do indeed. And what games are there that you have on your plate for the next couple of weeks? Anything at PAX?
So I'm keen to see what kind of newies are there. Um, Perhaps we do our annual PAX playthrough of their game that I'm forgetting the name of, the Ironwood one. Oh dear,
Thornwatch.
Thornwatch. We did a whole expansion episode about it. We
Mm-hmm.
played that at the last couple of PAXs, and now that we know how it works quite well, it might be interesting to play a quick game of that with some newbies as well. But you asked me about Gloomhaven recently, and that's a game that I hear mentioned a lot, and it seems pretty involved. But I'm keen to at least have a glance at the rulebook if they have it in the games library, and maybe give that a bit of a crack if it's not going to take us the whole day to work out how to play.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, closer to home, I have got Shadowkeep, the latest massive expansion for Destiny 2, installed and waiting for me. So I'm going to be jumping straight into that, take a bit of a break from Control and all of that madness for a little while, shoot some aliens, guard some towers,
Get some loot.
head back to the moon. That's it. I see how the new weapon system works. It's meant to be very different. Uh, they have made it free to play for new players, so I might be able to entice some old friends to become new players.
Yeah, right.
We'll
It's
see how that goes.
I noticed that I think it has just launched or it is launching like today or tomorrow on Steam.
Yeah.
They sort of shifted it across from whatever platform it was on before to Steam, and it's like you said, it's going free to play. I have been tempted to get in on that, but the lack of cross-platform is probably going to keep me away for now because
hmm
you play it on PlayStation, my brother has it on Xbox, and I'm not gonna play it on a console because I'm not going to enjoy it on a console. So it's going to be a PC thing for me. But until they get that cross-platform sorted, which, given the track record of cross-platform in general, is probably never in our lifetimes. So unfortunately, yeah, I don't know if that suddenly amazingly gets announced. Then you might be able to talk me into that because that's definitely one that I think I'm only going to get into if it can be with friends.
Well, if you're umming and ahhing, and I totally get that. That's why I'm back into it now because I've been playing with friends.
Hmm.
If you're umming and ahhing, I took a look at what is included in the free-to-play version of the game, and it's huge. There's so much of the game included in free-to-play. It's actually kind of incredible.
Yeah, I saw it was something like it's every release from the first year or something like that is in free to
It's
play.
everything from base up until Forsaken.
What was that, the first expansion?
No, there's the first big one. So it's essentially you get the first year, and then the expansion Curse of Osiris and the expansion Warmind.
Right, okay.
And like all of the raids and everything that came with that and whatnot. And then Forsaken was like a big expansion that unlocked a couple of other areas. But I think you'll have access to those areas to some extent, is what I was seeing as well.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Okay.
Pretty massive.
Yeah. I did see it looked like a lot of content. Well,
It's like a couple of years of content
yeah,
behind.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. I think MMO wise, WoW Classic has still got my attention at the moment. But hey, maybe further on down the line, you never know.
Maybe. Well, look, if there is something you think we should be playing and you want to get in touch with the podcast, you can hit us up on Twitter. We are at Disc and Dice. Or on Facebook, you can search up Disc and Dice or go to facebook.com/Disc and Dice. Or if you just want to email us directly, we are discanddice@gmail.com.
That is all correct. Please do get in touch if you got something you wanna let us know about. But that's about all we have for this episode. Just the two of us here today, of course. I don't think we ever actually acknowledged that that co-host JT wasn't here, but he hasn't just been sitting in the corner silently for the last 90 minutes. He is missing for this episode. Missing in action. Hopefully we will track him down before the next time we record.
Next time we record, we'll have both been to PAX. So JT will be here, but he probably will be sitting in the corner not talking because he'll have nothing to contribute.
Yeah, and we are still kind of umming and ahhing over the idea of doing a PAX special, perhaps. I think we'll have to weigh that up against the other stuff that we possibly get around to playing before then. We'll talk about that in the next couple of weeks. But that is all we have for this episode. So, Timmy, thanks for joining me again.
No worries. Always a pleasure, Paul.
Yeah, and I'll see you in about a week or so at PAX, and we will see all of our listeners in about 2 weeks for the next episode.
Absolutely. Get your Keyforge deck ready.
Oh, yeah. All right, we'll see you in a fortnight for some games of various kinds.